Picture, if you will, the misty landscapes of medieval China, where bamboo groves whisper ancient secrets and rivers flow like liquid silver through terraced valleys. In this serene setting, the Song Dynasty emerges not as a tale of conquest and warfare, but as a story of the human spirit's capacity for creativity, learning, and peaceful progress. Here, scholars compose poetry by moonlight, while craftsmen perfect porcelain that gleams like captured starlight. The Song period stands unique among Chinese dynasties, not for its military might or territorial expansion, but for its profound contributions to human knowledge and culture. It is during these peaceful centuries that we witness the flowering of Neo-Confucianism, the invention of movable-type printing, the development of sophisticated banking systems, and the creation of art so exquisite it continues to inspire wonder today. As we drift through the centuries together, imagine walking through the cobblestone streets of Kaifeng, the northern Song capital, where merchants from distant lands gather in bustling marketplaces filled with the gentle sounds of commerce and conversation. The air carries the subtle fragrance of jasmine tea and sandalwood incense, while the soft glow of paper lanterns illuminates faces engaged in scholarly discourse and artistic creation. The Song Dynasty divides naturally into two periods, like the gentle turning of seasons. The Northern Song, from 960 to 1127, represents spring and summer, a time of growth, expansion, and flourishing culture centered in the Yellow River Valley. The Southern Song, from 1127 to 1279, mirrors autumn and winter, a period of reflection, refinement, and deeper philosophical understanding as the dynasty retreated south to establish its capital in Hangzhou. Throughout this journey, we encounter figures whose names echo softly through history. Emperor Taizu, the dynasty's wise founder who chose scholarship over swordplay. Sima Guang, the historian whose comprehensive chronicles preserve the dynasty's memory like precious amber. And countless unnamed artisans, poets, and thinkers whose collective genius illuminated an entire civilization. The Song period witnesses technological marvels that seem almost magical in their ingenuity. Water-powered machinery hums quietly in workshops where craftsmen forge steel of unprecedented quality. In printing houses, wooden blocks press characters onto paper with rhythmic precision, multiplying knowledge as surely as spring rain multiplies flowers. Markets bustle with the exchange of paper money, the world's first government-issued currency, while compass needles guide ships across vast oceans to lands previously unknown. Yet perhaps most remarkably, this is a dynasty that prizes the pen over the sword, where civil examinations elevate scholars based on merit rather than birth, and where the greatest honors go not to warriors, but to those who can capture the essence of a mountain landscape in a single brushstroke or distill profound wisdom into elegant verse. As we settle into this gentle exploration, let the rhythm of ancient Chinese poetry flow through your consciousness like a meditation. The Song Dynasty unfolds before us not as a series of battles and conquests, but as a tapestry woven from countless individual lives, farmers tending their fields under vast skies, merchants traveling silk roads that connect civilizations, and scholars contemplating the mysteries of existence in moonlit gardens. This is a story told in the soft light of dawn, where each chapter reveals new wonders. The architectural marvels of pagodas that seem to touch the clouds, the delicate beauty of porcelain that captures light like frozen water, and the philosophical insights that continue to illuminate human understanding centuries later. Here, in the gentle embrace of the Song Dynasty, we find not just history, but humanity at its most creative and peaceful. As morning mist rises from the rivers and valleys of Song China, we enter an era that historians often describe as the dynasty's Golden Dawn. Under Emperor Taizong, who ascends the throne in 976, and his successor, Emperor Zhenzong, The foundations laid by the dynasty's founder blossom into a civilization of unprecedented sophistication and creativity. Imagine walking through the streets of Kaifeng, the northern Song capital, during these transformative decades. The city spreads along the Yellow River like a magnificent scroll painting come to life, its population swelling beyond 500,000 inhabitants, making it perhaps the largest city in the world at this time. The morning air carries the sounds of commerce and learning, the gentle clacking of wooden printing blocks, the soft conversations of scholars discussing philosophy in tea houses, and the rhythmic hammering of craftsmen perfecting their arts. Emperor Taizong, Taizu's younger brother, continues the dynasty's commitment to peaceful development while adding his own innovations to the imperial project. He establishes the Hanlin Academy, a scholarly institution that becomes the intellectual heart of the empire. Here, China's brightest minds gather not to plan military campaigns, but to compile encyclopedias, write official histories, and engage in the kind of systematic knowledge gathering that will characterize the entire Song period. The Academy's scholars work by candlelight through long winter evenings, their brushes moving across silk and paper with practiced elegance as they record everything from agricultural techniques to astronomical observations. Their efforts result in massive compilations, like the Imperial Readings of the Taiping era, a 1,000-volume collection that preserves classical literature, historical records, and practical knowledge for future generations. During this period, we witness the full flowering of the examination system that will become one of Song China's most revolutionary innovations. Young men from across the empire travel to the capital carrying nothing but their classical education and their dreams of government service. The examinations themselves unfold like elaborate intellectual ceremonies, with candidates spending days in small cells, composing essays on governance, ethics, and classical literature. What makes this system remarkable is not just its emphasis on merit over hereditary privilege, but its creation of a shared intellectual culture that unifies the empire. From the southern rice paddies to the northern steppes, educated Chinese share common references, common values, and common ways of thinking about governance and society. The examination candidates memorize the same classical texts, study the same commentaries, and develop similar approaches to problem solving. The technological innovations of this era unfold with the quiet persistence of natural growth. In workshops throughout the empire, craftsmen perfect techniques that will revolutionize human civilization. The movable type printing system, invented during this period, represents more than just a technical achievement. It embodies the Song Dynasty's fundamental belief in the democratization of knowledge. Picture a printing house in late 10th century Kaifeng, where wooden blocks carved with individual characters can be arranged and rearranged to create any text. The innovation seems simple, yet its implications stretch across centuries. Books, previously luxury items that required months of hand copying, can now be produced in quantity and sold at prices that make them accessible to merchants, farmers, and anyone else who can read. The proliferation of printed books transforms Chinese society in subtle but profound ways. Regional dialects begin to standardize as printed literature spreads common forms of expression. Technical knowledge spreads more rapidly as agricultural manuals, medical texts, and craftsmen's guides reach rural areas that previously had little access to specialized information. Even entertainment evolves as printed novels and poetry collections make literature available to audiences far beyond the imperial court. Agricultural development during this period demonstrates the dynasty's commitment to practical improvement in people's daily lives. Government officials introduce new crops from Southeast Asia, including new varieties of rice that can grow in previously unsuitable conditions. They sponsor the construction of irrigation systems that transform marginal lands into productive farms. Most importantly, they create agricultural extension services that spread knowledge of improved farming techniques throughout the empire. The result is what historians call an agricultural revolution that increases food production while reducing the labor required for farming. This surplus agricultural productivity frees workers for other activities, contributing to the growth of cities, the expansion of trade, and the flourishing of arts and crafts that characterize the Song period. Commercial innovation keeps pace with agricultural and technological development. The government begins issuing paper money, the world's first official paper currency, initially as a supplement to metal coins, but gradually as a complete monetary system. This innovation facilitates trade across the vast distances of the Chinese Empire while demonstrating the dynasty's sophisticated understanding of economic theory. The foreign policy of this era reflects the same preference for peaceful solutions over military confrontation that characterizes domestic governance. Rather than launching expensive military campaigns against northern neighbors like the Liao dynasty, Song emperors negotiate tribute agreements that purchase peace at a fraction of the cost of warfare. Critics sometimes characterize these payments as signs of weakness, but the result is decades of peace that allow Chinese civilization to flourish. The cultural achievements of this period create art and literature that continue to inspire wonder today. Landscape painting reaches new heights of sophistication as artists develop techniques for capturing the essence of natural scenes rather than merely their surface appearance. Poets like Su Dongpo create verses that blend personal emotion with philosophical insight, establishing literary forms that influence Chinese poetry for centuries. The philosophical developments of this era lay the groundwork for Neo-Confucianism, the synthetic system of thought that will dominate Chinese intellectual life for nearly a millennium. Scholars begin the careful work of reconciling classical Confucian ethics with Buddhist metaphysics and Taoist naturalism, creating a comprehensive worldview that addresses questions of personal cultivation, social organization, and cosmic understanding. As Emperor Zhenzong's reign draws to a close in 1022, the Song Dynasty has established itself as more than just another Chinese kingdom. It has become the center of a civilization that values learning over conquest, innovation over tradition, and the peaceful development of human potential over the accumulation of power through force. The gentle dawn of the 11th century illuminates a Chinese civilization transformed by 7 decades of peaceful development and intellectual flowering. As we drift through this golden period of Song achievement, we encounter a society that has discovered the secret of sustained prosperity, the patient cultivation of human knowledge and creativity rather than the quick gains of military conquest. Emperor Renzong ascends the throne in 1022 as a child, but his long reign, which extends to 1063, becomes synonymous with Song China at its most confident and creative. The regency period that governs during his minority demonstrates the dynasty's institutional maturity, as senior scholars and administrators manage the empire's affairs with the same careful attention to detail that characterizes all Song governance. Picture the imperial court during these decades as resembling a vast library combined with a sophisticated workshop. In the morning halls, officials debate policy questions with the thoroughness of university professors examining philosophical problems. In the afternoon workshops, craftsmen and inventors pursue technical innovations with the support of government funding and scholarly interest. The boundary between theoretical knowledge and practical application dissolves as the dynasty's commitment to learning embraces both abstract wisdom and concrete problem-solving. The technological achievements of this period read like a catalog of human ingenuity. The magnetic compass, perfected during these years, revolutionizes navigation and makes possible the maritime expeditions that will connect China with Southeast Asia, India, and beyond. The compass needle, floating in its bowl of water or mounted on its pivot, points steadily northward, whether installed in an imperial palace or a humble fishing boat, democratizing navigation just as printing has democratized knowledge. In metallurgy workshops, craftsmen develop techniques for producing steel of extraordinary quality and quantity. The Song Dynasty's annual iron production reaches levels that Europe will not match for several centuries, yet this achievement comes not through forced labor or environmental destruction, but through the patient refinement of techniques passed down from master to apprentice. The soft glow of furnaces illuminates faces concentrated on their craft, creating tools and weapons that combine utility with beauty. The agricultural innovations of this period transform the Chinese countryside into a landscape of unprecedented productivity and sustainability. New crops introduced from Southeast Asia, particularly champa rice, which can produce multiple harvests per year, allow the same land to feed many more people. Terraced fields climb mountainsides like natural amphitheaters, each level carefully engineered to capture and conserve water while preventing erosion. Government agricultural policies demonstrate the dynasty's understanding that prosperity grows from the ground up. Rather than simply collecting taxes from farmers, the imperial administration provides technical assistance, improved seeds, and financial support for irrigation projects. Agricultural extension services spread knowledge of crop rotation, fertilization techniques, and pest management throughout the empire, creating a rural prosperity that becomes the foundation of urban flourishing. The commercial revolution of this era transforms daily life throughout Chinese society. Paper money becomes universally accepted, facilitating trade across distances that would have made metal currency impractical. But more than mere convenience, the monetary system demonstrates sophisticated economic thinking that recognizes money as a tool for facilitating productive activity rather than as wealth in itself. Markets in Song cities become complex ecosystems of specialized trades and services. In Kaifeng's commercial districts, merchants from Central Asia sell precious stones next to local craftsmen offering silk textiles and porcelain. Tea houses serve as informal banks where merchants negotiate credit arrangements and foreign exchange. Restaurant owners develop regional cuisines that attract customers from across the empire, creating a cultural as well as economic marketplace. The examination system reaches full maturity during this period, creating what historians recognize as the world's first true meritocracy. Young men from farming families find themselves serving as county magistrates, while scholars from humble backgrounds rise to become imperial advisors. The system is not without its limitations. Women remain excluded, and the classical curriculum sometimes seems disconnected from practical governance challenges, but it represents a revolutionary break from hereditary aristocracy. The social effects of the examination system extend far beyond government service. Because success depends on literacy and classical education, families throughout China invest in schools and tutors. Book production expands to meet growing demand for educational materials. Even rural villages support teachers and maintain libraries, creating a literate population that exceeds anything previously seen in human history. Religious and philosophical developments during this period create the intellectual synthesis known as Neo-Confucianism. Scholars like Zhou Dunyi and Shao Yong begin the systematic work of integrating Confucian ethics with Buddhist metaphysics and Taoist naturalism. Their writings unfold like peaceful meditations, exploring questions of cosmic order, human nature, and social organization with the patience of gardeners cultivating rare flowers. The artistic achievements of this era establish aesthetic standards that influence Chinese culture for centuries. Landscape painters develop techniques for capturing not just the appearance of natural scenes, but their spiritual essence. Their scrolls unfold like journeys through idealized countryside where misty mountains rise. Above tranquil lakes and tiny human figures move through landscapes that suggest harmony between civilization and nature. Porcelain production reaches new heights of technical and artistic achievement during these decades. In kilns throughout southern China, Craftsmen perfect glazing techniques that create surfaces resembling ice, jade, or moonlight on water. The porcelain trade extends Chinese cultural influence throughout Asia and beyond, as foreign courts treasure these ceramic masterpieces that combine practical utility with transcendent beauty. The urban development of this period creates cities that balance human needs with aesthetic considerations. Kaifeng's growth follows careful planning principles that provide for commerce and industry while preserving space for gardens, temples, and scholarly retreats. The city's famous night markets demonstrate the dynasty's confidence in public safety and social order, as merchants and customers conduct business under lantern light in an atmosphere of festive security. International relations during this period reflect the dynasty's preference for cultural influence over military dominance. Chinese scholars, artists, and craftsmen travel throughout East Asia, spreading song innovations and aesthetic standards. Foreign students journey to Chinese universities, returning home with knowledge that transforms their own societies. Trade networks carry not just goods, but ideas, creating a sphere of Chinese cultural influence that extends far beyond the empire's political boundaries. As the 11th century progresses toward its close, Song China has achieved something unprecedented in human history, a civilization that sustains itself through learning and innovation rather than conquest and exploitation. The empire's prosperity rests not on the subjugation of neighbors, but on the liberation of human creativity and the systematic application of knowledge to practical problems. As the 12th century dawns over the Chinese landscape, the Song Dynasty faces its first serious challenges after more than a century of unprecedented prosperity and growth. Yet even in adversity, the dynasty's response reflects the same thoughtful, scholarly approach that has characterized its governance since its founding. Rather than reacting with military aggression or authoritarian crackdowns, Song leaders adapt their institutions and policies with the careful deliberation of philosophers confronting new theoretical problems. Emperor Huizong, who reigns from 1100 to 1125, embodies both the heights of Song cultural achievement and the complexities of governing in an increasingly challenging world. Picture him in his studio during the early morning hours, before the demands of imperial duties intrude, working on a delicate painting of birds and flowers with the concentration of a master craftsman. His artistic talents are extraordinary. His paintings and calligraphy represent the pinnacle of Chinese aesthetic achievement. Yet his reign occurs during a period when military and diplomatic challenges test the dynasty's commitment to peaceful solutions. The emperor's passion for the arts transforms the imperial court into perhaps history's most sophisticated center of cultural patronage. The Hanlin Academy expands its activities to include not just scholarly research but artistic creation and preservation. Court painters develop new techniques that influence Chinese art for centuries, while imperial workshops produce porcelain, lacquerware, and textiles of unprecedented refinement. Yet this cultural flowering occurs against a backdrop of growing external pressures. The Jin dynasty, established by the Yurshan people in what is now northeastern China, represents a new type of challenge for Song diplomacy. Unlike previous northern neighbors who were content with tribute payments and peaceful coexistence, the Jin state pursues aggressive expansionist policies that threaten the delicate balance of power in East Asia. The Song response to these challenges demonstrates both the strengths and limitations of a civilization built on scholarly values rather than military might. Government officials debate policy options with the same thoroughness they bring to examining classical texts, considering multiple perspectives and seeking solutions that preserve the dynasty's fundamental commitment to peaceful development. Unfortunately, the complexity of their decision-making processes sometimes proves inadequate for responding to rapidly changing military situations. The domestic policies of this period reveal the dynasty's continuing commitment to innovation and reform, even under pressure. The new policies reforms Initiated earlier by Wang Anshi and continuing in modified form under Huizong, demonstrate sophisticated economic thinking that recognizes the interconnections between agricultural productivity, commercial development, and government revenue. These reforms include government programs to provide low-interest loans to farmers, state involvement in commerce to stabilize prices and ensure fair distribution, and educational initiatives that expand access to schooling throughout the empire. The policies generate controversy among scholars and officials, as befits a society that values intellectual debate, but they represent serious attempts to address the economic challenges of governing an increasingly complex civilization. The technological innovations of this period continue the dynasty's tradition of practical problem-solving through systematic investigation. Advances in printing technology make books even more widely accessible, while improvements in navigation instruments and shipbuilding techniques support the expansion of maritime trade. The use of gunpowder, originally developed for fireworks and mining, begins to find military applications, though the Song approach to military technology emphasizes defensive rather than offensive capabilities. Agricultural development during these decades demonstrates the dynasty's understanding that prosperity ultimately depends on rural productivity and stability. New crops continue to be introduced and disseminated, while irrigation projects extend productive farming into previously marginal areas. Government agricultural policies emphasize sustainability and long-term productivity rather than maximum short-term extraction, reflecting the scholarly understanding that lasting prosperity requires patient cultivation. The examination system reaches its full development during this period, creating a truly national intellectual culture that unifies the empire despite growing external pressures. The system produces administrators who share common educational backgrounds and values, enabling the government to function effectively even during periods of political stress. At the same time, the system's emphasis on classical learning sometimes seems disconnected from the practical challenges of military defense and border security. Urban development during these decades creates cities that rank among the world's most sophisticated and prosperous. Kaifeng's population approaches 1 million inhabitants, making it the largest city in the world at the time. The city's markets offer goods from throughout Asia and beyond, while its schools and libraries serve students from across the empire. The night markets, entertainment districts, and cultural institutions create an urban environment that balances commerce with learning, prosperity with artistic achievement. The religious and philosophical developments of this period deepen the intellectual synthesis that will define Chinese thought for centuries. Neo-Confucian scholars complete the systematic integration of Confucian ethics, Buddhist metaphysics, and Taoist naturalism, creating a comprehensive worldview that addresses questions of personal cultivation, social organization, and cosmic understanding. Their writings unfold like meditative explorations, combining rigorous logical analysis with poetic insight. Foreign relations during this period demonstrate both the achievements and limitations of the Song approach to international affairs. Cultural exchanges with neighboring countries spread Chinese innovations and aesthetic standards throughout East Asia, creating a sphere of influence based on voluntary adoption rather than military coercion. However, the dynasty's preference for negotiation and tribute payments over military confrontation proves increasingly problematic when dealing with aggressively expansionist neighbors. The artistic achievements of the Huizong era represent perhaps the highest point of Chinese aesthetic development. Court painters create landscape scrolls that capture not just the appearance of natural scenes, but their spiritual essence, while calligraphers develop new forms that balance technical perfection with emotional expression. The emperor's own artistic works, particularly his paintings of birds and flowers, demonstrate a sensitivity to natural beauty that reflects the dynasty's broader commitment to harmony between human civilization and the natural world. The economic policies of this period reveal sophisticated understanding of market mechanisms and government's role in economic development. The state monopolies on salt and iron generate revenue while ensuring quality control, while government involvement in grain markets stabilizes prices and prevents famine. The paper currency system expands to meet the needs of growing commercial activity, demonstrating the dynasty's willingness to embrace financial innovations that support economic growth. As external pressures mount during the 1220s, the dynasty's institutions and values face their severest test. The Jin dynasty's military campaigns threaten not just territorial integrity, but the entire Song model of civilization based on scholarly values and peaceful development. The government's response combines traditional diplomatic approaches with military preparations, but the fundamental challenge remains. Can a civilization built on learning and cultural achievement survive in a world where military force increasingly determines political outcomes? The events of 1127 will provide a definitive, if tragic, answer to this question. Yet even as we anticipate the crisis that will end the Northern Song period, we must recognize the extraordinary achievements of this era. A civilization that created unprecedented prosperity through knowledge rather than conquest, that developed human potential through education rather than coercion, and that demonstrated the possibility of organizing society around scholarly values rather than military might. In the misty spring of 1127, as plum blossoms bloom along the Yangtze River Valley, the Song dynasty faces its gravest crisis and most profound transformation. The Jin army's capture of Kaifeng and the emperor marks not the end of Song civilization, but its metamorphosis, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis to discover new possibilities for flight. The fall of the northern Song capital unfolds with tragic swiftness, yet the dynasty's response demonstrates the resilience that comes from institutions built on learning rather than mere military might. As news of the disaster spread southward, scattered officials, scholars, and military commanders rally around Prince Zhao Gu, who will become Emperor Gaozong and establish what historians call the Southern Song Dynasty. Imagine the scene in Nanjing during those uncertain weeks of 1127, as refugees from the north arrive carrying not just personal possessions, but the accumulated knowledge of a civilization. Scholars clutch precious manuscripts, craftsmen bring their tools and techniques, and administrators preserve the records and procedures that have enabled effective governance. The physical capital may have fallen, but the intellectual capital of Song civilization survives intact. Emperor Gaozong's establishment of the Southern Song represents more than mere political expedient. It demonstrates the dynasty's fundamental understanding that true strength lies in adaptability rather than rigid adherence to tradition. The new capital in Hangzhou, initially chosen for strategic reasons, becomes a showcase for Song civilization's ability to flourish under changed circumstances. The geography of southern China shapes the dynasty's evolution in profound ways. The Yangtze River Valley and the regions south of it offer different opportunities and challenges than the Yellow River heartland. The climate supports different crops, the terrain requires different architectural solutions, and the cultural traditions blend Chinese civilization with Southern influences that have developed over centuries of relative independence. Hangzhou emerges as perhaps the most beautiful capital in the world during this period. Built around the scenic West Lake, the city combines urban sophistication with natural beauty in ways that reflect Song aesthetic principles. Pagodas rise from garden settings that seem to grow naturally from the landscape, while bridges arch gracefully over waterways that serve both transportation and scenic purposes. The city's markets demonstrate the commercial vitality that sustains Southern Song prosperity. Merchants from Southeast Asia, India, and even distant Arab lands gather in warehouses along the Grand Canal, trading goods that span the known world. The famous night markets illuminate streets filled with vendors offering everything from local delicacies to foreign curiosities, creating an atmosphere of cosmopolitan sophistication that rivals any contemporary city. The administrative, Adaptation required for governing from Hangzhou reveals the flexibility of Song institutions. The examination system continues to function, attracting candidates from throughout the empire and maintaining the meritocratic principles that have become fundamental to Chinese governance. However, the reduced territory and changed circumstances require modifications that demonstrate the system's capacity for evolution. The military reforms of this period reflect hard-learned lessons about the realities of power in a world where diplomatic solutions alone cannot guarantee security. While maintaining their preference for defensive strategies and scholarly leadership, Song officials develop new approaches to military organization that balance the dynasty's civilian values with practical security needs. The technological innovations of the Southern Song period continue the dynasty's tradition of practical problem-solving through systematic investigation. Advances in navigation support the maritime trade that becomes increasingly important as overland routes remain disrupted by political instability. Improvements in agricultural techniques help maximize productivity from the smaller territory under direct Song control. The development of printing technology during this period demonstrates the dynasty's understanding that knowledge preservation and dissemination remain crucial even under adverse circumstances. Publishing houses in Hangzhou and other southern cities produce texts that preserve classical learning while also documenting contemporary innovations. The proliferation of printed books ensures that Song intellectual achievements survive regardless of political upheavals. The artistic achievements of this period reflect both continuity with earlier traditions and adaptation to new circumstances. Southern landscape painting develops distinctive characteristics that capture the different scenery and atmosphere of the Yangtze Valley region. Artists learn to paint bamboo groves and misty rivers with the same sensitivity their predecessors brought to northern mountains and plains. The philosophical developments of the Southern Song period deepen and refine the Neo-Confucian synthesis that has become central to Chinese intellectual life. Scholars like Zhu Xi create systematic treatments of ethics, metaphysics, and political theory that influence Chinese thought for centuries. Their works unfold like architectural projects, carefully constructing comprehensive worldviews from carefully examined foundations. The economic policies of this period demonstrate sophisticated adaptation to changed circumstances. The reduced territory requires more intensive development of available resources, leading to innovations in agriculture, industry, and commerce that increase productivity within smaller geographical limits. The government's role in economic development becomes more active and systematic, reflecting lessons learned from earlier successes and failures. Foreign relations during this period require delicate balancing between acceptance of territorial losses and maintenance of cultural and political independence. The tribute relationship with the Qin dynasty represents a pragmatic accommodation to military realities, while diplomatic and commercial relationships with other neighbors demonstrate the continuing attractiveness of Song civilization as a model for development. The urban development of Hangzhou and other southern Song cities creates environments that balance practical needs with aesthetic considerations. The cities incorporate natural features like lakes and hills into their planning, creating urban spaces that feel more like large gardens than mere commercial and administrative centers. The integration of architecture with landscape reflects Song understanding of harmony between human civilization and natural environment. The educational developments of this period extend the dynasty's commitment to learning and self-improvement throughout society. Schools proliferate not just in cities, but in rural areas, creating a literate population that can participate effectively in the examination system and contribute to economic and cultural development. The emphasis on education represents both practical policy and philosophical commitment to human potential. The commercial innovations of this period demonstrate the dynasty's ability to maintain prosperity despite territorial losses and political challenges. The expansion of maritime trade compensates for disrupted overland routes, while innovations in banking and credit facilitate long-distance commerce. The development of specialized industries creates products that command premium prices in international markets. Religious developments during this period create new syntheses that reflect both traditional Chinese values and influences from Buddhism and Taoism. Temple construction flourishes as prosperity returns, while religious festivals and ceremonies provide community focus that helps maintain social cohesion during periods of political uncertainty. As the 12th century draws toward its close, the Southern Song has demonstrated that political setbacks need not mean civilizational decline. Through careful adaptation of institutions, creative response to changed circumstances, and unwavering commitment to the values that define Song civilization, the dynasty has created a new model for development that may be more sustainable than its northern predecessor. The achievements of this period prepare the foundation for what many historians consider the Southern Song's golden age, when territorial limitation paradoxically creates conditions for intensive development that produces innovations in technology, scholarship, and the arts that influence human civilization for centuries to come. As the 13th century unfolds like the final movement of a great symphony, the Song dynasty enters its culminating phase with a maturity and sophistication that represents the full flowering of Chinese civilization. Though geographically constrained and politically challenged, the Southern Song during these final decades achieves intellectual and cultural heights that illuminate not just Chinese history, but the entire human story. The reign of Emperor Ningzong, beginning in 1194, inaugurates what historians recognize as the Southern Song's most creative period. The smaller territory, rather than limiting development, creates conditions for intensive cultivation of human knowledge and artistic achievement. Like a master gardener working with a small plot, Song civilization focuses its energies on perfecting rather than expanding, creating innovations that will influence human development for centuries. Picture the scholarly academies of this period, where the greatest minds of the age gather in peaceful courtyards surrounded by carefully tended gardens. Here, philosophers like Zhu Xi complete the systematic development of Neo-Confucianism, creating comprehensive frameworks for understanding everything from personal ethics to cosmic order. Their discussions unfold through long afternoons, each question explored with the patience of craftsmen perfecting their art. Zhu Xi's philosophical synthesis represents perhaps the Song dynasty's greatest intellectual achievement. His commentaries on the classical texts become standard references for educated Chinese, while his systematic approach to ethics, metaphysics, and political theory creates a unified worldview that addresses both practical governance and spiritual cultivation. His school in Fujian province becomes a pilgrimage site for scholars throughout East Asia, spreading Chinese philosophical insights far beyond the empire's political boundaries. The technological innovations of this final period demonstrate the dynasty's continuing commitment to practical problem-solving through systematic investigation. Advances in metallurgy produce steel of extraordinary quality, while improvements in textiles create fabrics that become prized throughout the known world. The development of sophisticated water-powered machinery anticipates industrial techniques that Europe will not achieve for several centuries. The printing industry reaches unprecedented sophistication during these decades, producing books of remarkable beauty and technical excellence. Publishers in Hangzhou and other southern cities create editions of classical texts, contemporary works, and practical manuals that make knowledge accessible throughout society. The famous encyclopedia projects of this period preserve vast amounts of information while demonstrating the dynasty's commitment to systematic knowledge organization. Agricultural development during this period achieves remarkable intensity and sustainability. The reduced territory requires maximum productivity from available land, leading to innovations in crop rotation, fertilization, and water management that increase yields while maintaining soil health. The introduction of new crops from Southeast Asia continues, creating agricultural diversity that provides both economic security and improved nutrition. The commercial achievements of the final Song period create trade networks that span continents. Chinese merchants established trading posts throughout Southeast Asia, India, and the Middle East, carrying not just goods, but cultural influences that spread song innovations and aesthetic standards. The famous Chinese admiral Zheng He's expeditions, though technically occurring after the Song period, build upon navigation and shipbuilding techniques perfected during these decades. Urban development in Hangzhou and other southern Song cities creates environments that balance human needs with natural beauty. The capital's population approaches 1.5 million inhabitants, making it the largest city in the world, yet careful planning ensures that growth occurs harmoniously with the natural landscape. Parks, gardens, and water features are integrated into urban design, creating living spaces that nurture both body and spirit. The artistic achievements of this period establish aesthetic standards that influence Chinese culture for centuries. Landscape painters develop techniques for capturing the essence of natural scenes with unprecedented subtlety and power. Their scrolls unfold like meditative journeys through idealized countryside, where every element, from towering mountains to tiny fishing boats, contributes to overall harmony. Porcelain production reaches levels of technical and artistic perfection that make Song ceramics treasured throughout the world. The subtle glazes and elegant forms produced in kilns throughout southern China represent the perfect marriage of technical skill and aesthetic sensitivity. These pieces, discovered in archaeological sites from Japan to Africa, testify to the global reach of Song commercial and cultural influence. The examination system during this period achieves its full potential as a mechanism for social mobility and administrative excellence. Despite the reduced territory, the system continues to attract candidates from throughout the Chinese cultural sphere, maintaining meritocratic principles while adapting to changed political circumstances. The scholarly culture created by the examinations produces administrators whose competence and integrity become legendary. The military developments of this period reflect the dynasty's continuing preference for defensive strategies and technological solutions over aggressive expansion. The use of gunpowder weapons becomes more sophisticated, though always within the context of protecting rather than conquering. The famous walls and fortifications of this period demonstrate advanced engineering techniques that maximize defensive capability, while minimizing resource expenditure. Foreign relations during the final Song decades require increasingly sophisticated diplomacy as new powers emerge to challenge the established order. The Mongol expansion under Genghis Khan and his successors creates unprecedented challenges that test every aspect of Song statecraft. Yet even under extreme pressure, the dynasty maintains its commitment to negotiation and cultural influence over military confrontation. The economic policies of this period demonstrate remarkable innovation in monetary theory and practice. The paper currency system becomes fully developed, facilitating commerce throughout the empire and beyond. Banking and credit systems reach levels of sophistication that anticipate modern financial institutions, while government involvement in economic development balances market mechanisms with public welfare considerations. The philosophical and religious developments of the final Song period create syntheses that will influence Chinese thought for centuries. Buddhist temples and Taoist monasteries flourish alongside Confucian academies, creating a pluralistic intellectual environment that encourages creative thinking while maintaining social harmony. The period's great philosophical works address questions of meaning and purpose that remain relevant to contemporary readers. As the Mongol pressure intensifies during the 2270s, the Song dynasty faces its ultimate test. Yet even in these final years, the civilization continues to produce innovations and artistic achievements that testify to the power of human creativity when properly nurtured and directed. The dynasty's last emperors, though facing impossible military odds, maintain their commitment to the values that have defined Song civilization for over 3 centuries. The final collapse in 1279, when the last Song emperor drowns following the naval battle of Yamen, marks the end of an era, but not the extinction of Song achievements. The institutions, technologies, and cultural innovations developed during the Song period continue to influence Chinese civilization and, through Chinese influence, world development for centuries to come. The Song dynasty's legacy extends far beyond its political boundaries or temporal limits. Its demonstration that civilization can flourish through learning rather than conquest, that prosperity can be achieved through innovation rather than exploitation, and that human potential can be realized through education rather than coercion, provides inspiration for all subsequent efforts to create just and sustainable societies. As we conclude our gentle journey through 3 centuries of Song achievement, we might reflect on the dynasty's most profound lesson: that true strength lies not in the ability to dominate others, but in the wisdom to cultivate the best possibilities within ourselves and our communities. In the quiet halls of Song academies, in the peaceful gardens of Song cities, and in the enduring influence of Song innovations, we discover not just history but hope evidence that human beings, when given the opportunity, will choose creation over destruction, learning over ignorance, and cooperation over conflict.